Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be with you. Welcome back to Canada Today show. We are a special Canadian edition or show on Muslim Network TV. My name is Taha Ghayur, your host today on Canada Today. It is a pleasure to bring you an inside look at very critical and relevant events that take place across our city of Toronto and other cities across Canada. And we want to make sure that we are bringing to you some very important and interesting perspectives on issues that matter to all Muslims in Canada, as well as issues that matter to our neighbors in Canada. Earlier this month, you might have heard about a very disappointing decision made by the Ontario Provincial Police, as well as the Kawartha Lakes Police Services, about the late Soleiman Faqiri, a 30-year-old man whose death sparked a countrywide rally for real mental health awareness and prison reforms. Today, we are fortunate to have a one-on-one conversation with someone who was very close to Soleiman Faqiri. Please welcome our brother and friend Yusuf Faqiri, who is the older brother and a strong supporter, of course, of Soleiman Faqiri and justice for Soleiman. Since 2016, Yusuf has built a name for himself as an advocate for police reform and mental health. Yusuf is also the founder of Justice for Soli movement. And Yusuf has built a professional senior level career working for provincial ministries. Today we'll learn about the Justice for Soli organization, which has made some progressive strides in demanding answers and positive change for the state of policing and mental health treatment in Canada. Welcome, Brother Yusuf, to Canada Today.
Assalamu alaikum. It's a pleasure being here today.
Welcome, salam. Thank you for your time. It's been hard not to notice the constant activism, mashallah, that you have been engaged with on behalf of your brother and the justice that you and your family are seeking. And we commend you for all the great work that you're doing for the past 3.5 years. And we'll get more into the specifics of your work and the cause itself shortly. We wanted to start off with, start right at the top for our viewers both in Canada and the US who may not be aware of the tragic story of Soleiman Faqiri. We want to hear about what actually happened and the breakdown of December 15th, murder of Soleiman Faqiri on December 15th, 2016. So please help us understand what happened and what were some of the circumstances that led to his imprisonment to begin with, and the sad story that led to the final days and final moments of his death.
Absolutely. Once again, Jazakallah khair, Brother Taha, for bringing me here. Jazakallah khair to everybody who's listening. I greet you with the greetings of peace. May there be barakat in our efforts, and for all of you supporting us. Before I start, I just want to make sure what I'm about to articulate and highlight, there's some graphic content. So for, what I'm about to say, it might trigger folks, and I wanted to make sure I give that warning. So let's keep that in mind. The tragedy of Soleiman Faqiri is a tragedy that I don't wish on anybody. It's a tragedy that befell my family, and we're using our pain to be an inspiration to others, to give hope, so another family does not go through what we're going through. And that's what motivates us ultimately. So let's talk about the facts about his vicious beating death, about what befell him, and that continues to befall our family. On December 4th, 2016, Soleiman was temporarily taken into custody at a Canadian jail known in the city of Lindsay, Ontario, which is about half an hour east of Toronto. He was never supposed to be in jail to begin with. They were supposed to take him to a hospital. Instead, they took him in the jail. He was there on December 4th. He was dead on December 15th. In those 11 days, my family tried to visit Soleiman 4 times. Not once were we able to see him. In those 11 days, staff at the facility were made aware of Soleiman's severe illness known as schizophrenia. In those 11 days, we were never able to see Soleiman. We never knew what happened to him. It's as if he was thrown in a dark hole to never be seen again. 3 days before his tragic demise in his end, an Ontario judge, the Canadian judiciary, ordered him to be transferred to a hospital. This is 72 hours before his death, because Soleiman was suffering from mental illness, and the judge heard loud and clear that he shouldn't have been there to begin with. So they ordered him to be transferred to the hospital. But that order was never respected. And the only one of the other reasons why Soleiman was never transferred to a hospital was because there wasn't any room for beds. So those are the facts at hand. Now let's talk about the climactic and violent day that ended his life on December 15th. Once again, I want to make sure everybody to know that there's about graphic content I'm about to articulate here. At the time of his death, according to the Ontario coroner, this is the medical doctor that oversees deaths in provincial jails. Both Soleiman's legs and hands were tied. He was pepper sprayed twice. More than a dozen guards took turns beating him to death. And he was in segregation the whole time. According to the coroner, there was 50 bruises on Soleiman's body. Not 1, not 5, but 50. When we were doing his janazah, I couldn't pull myself together to clean his body. I fainted. 50 bruises. And these are not facts coming from me or the family. This is coming from the medical doctor. So those are the facts at hand. What makes this story even tragic is that at the time, my family put our full trust in the justice system, in the Canadian justice system. And the local police opened an investigation. They investigated the local jail. And after a year-long investigation, they decided to not press charges. This is the Quarter Lakes Police Service. They decided to not press charges. Do you want me to continue, Brother Taha, or should I?
Yeah, so I do have a couple of questions I want to get to. I definitely want to get to the judgment part and the whole legal dilemma that you guys are, of course, facing. And really, it's very difficult even hearing some of the details that you have been describing. Help us understand, those of us who are not aware of, a lot of mental illnesses. We know that he was diagnosed, I believe, at the age of 18 with schizophrenia in 2005. Help us understand, how does this condition characterize somebody's experience, especially during a challenging circumstance or involving law enforcement or any sort of situation that triggers stress of any sort. Help us understand how that probably, of course, made in this case make things even more challenging. Not only, in his case, of course, specifically for him, and probably led to where he was, unfortunately, at the end.
So I'll give you a very very important statement here that I think everybody needs to understand. It took my mom 11 years to keep Soleiman, Allah yarhamu, alive. It took the justice system 11 days for him to be killed under their care. The system in itself is not made up and is not created to help people with mental illness. The system in itself, it criminalizes individuals suffering from mental illness. But one of the things, and this is an advice to the audience and to the community that I love, our Muslim community, one of the things we as a community have failed is our treatment of individuals suffering from mental illness. And I come from one of those communities within the Muslim community, the Afghan community, that does, we still struggle with the treatment. But what my mom did was that she made a shift and forced my family to accept Soleiman for who he was. And it was that support that kept him alive. And we have to understand, people with mental illness, they're some of the most gifted people. Soleiman's case being no different. He was a gifted mind. He spoke 3 languages. He taught my mom the Quran. He was studying, for the audience who are listening outside of Canada, he was studying at University of Waterloo. This is one of the most competitive engineering universities, not just in Canada, but in the world. This was a gifted mind, and he was athletically gifted as well. but the illness took his life. But what my parents, especially my mom, did not allow is for him to be stigmatized. He had a decent life, but the justice system ended up taking his life. And the thing that's important, that support base that my family gave him, is what kept him alive. And that's what makes this story so tragic, is that when my family did try to help him when he was temporarily in custody, it wasn't given to us. And what's dangerous too, Brother Taha, one last comment to make before we continue, is that if there's no family support with people suffering from mental illness, that individual is most likely either loses their life or they'll be on the streets. And we, as a family, do not allow that to happen. And that's the tragic part out of all this.
SubhanAllah, there's so much to learn from this and so much to, in fact, talk about. I wanted to, before we get into and come back to actually, the life that you just described, the beautiful life of Soleiman and your family life as well, of course, as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about the actual legal case itself. So help us understand what has transpired since his death in terms of inquiries that have been made. And you did touch upon, of course, the recent, judgment that came from OPP and the Quarter Lakes Police Services. So tell us, what does that mean for you and your case and your family's, struggle to find justice at this point? And what does this mean, and where does it take us next? What is it, at this point, this no action decision from OPP. First of all, how is your family taking it? And secondly, what are your next steps that you guys are thinking, and your legal team, of course, is thinking of at this point?
Absolutely. The OPP, we put our full trust in the police in making the right decision. Soleiman's case is not a very great case. It's not it's very clear what they did to him. And the OPP is the one that called the eyewitness who saw Soleiman's beating death. They called him a credible witness. They don't deny that this was a beating. And so then what they effectively said to the family, that we cannot press charges because we do not know which guard gave the fatal blow, which is such an egregious and a dangerous statement that stands slapping in the face of the Canadian justice system. Is that what they're effectively saying is that if you want to commit murder, do it in a group. It's as if there's different standards for people who suffer from mental illness and law enforcement. And so that's the decision that the OPP gave us. We're devastated. We're absolutely devastated, but we're not broken. We remain resilient and determined to continue to fight back, not just for Soleiman, Allah yarhamu, but there's so many people across this nation that suffer from mental illness that are counting on my family to continue our fight and to get justice for Soleiman. And justice for him is justice for every other person who died as a result of the justice system that suffered from mental illness. In the course of a week, Brother Taham, more than 60 Canadian organizations have outright rejected and condemned the OPP's decision. They have resoundingly rejected their decision and made statements and saying, statements that questions the very independence of the OPP's investigation, that questions, of where they came to this. Lawyers from outside of my family have questioned this very decision. So it's not over. Legally, there's the inquest that's available and that's going to be happening. We don't know the date, but that's the next step. But between now and then, we're asking for the same thing we've been asking since December 15, 2016, criminal charges into the death of Soleiman Faqiri. My late brother didn't roll over and die. My late brother was beaten to death by the very individuals that are supposed to have the highest standards of integrity and morals that work within the parameters of the state, yet they're far from that. They killed my brother. He was killed under government care, and we need justice for him. Soleiman mattered.
Absolutely. SubhanAllah. May Allah keep you guys strong and all the people who have been working with you strong to continue this fight, because this will be inshallah, this is gonna set a precedent for something of this nature that should not happen ever again. And we know, of course, there's so many who have suffered, and we will come to it in a moment to talk very specifically about, of course, Ijaz Chaudhry, for instance. But aren't there other cases? Isn't there in legal history cases where there is a collective, collective punishment for those who actually commit such crimes. I'm sure there are historically cases where if they can find one person who did deal that fatal blow, then everybody who was part of the crime, of course, it has to be charged and it has to be has to face the consequences. So, are you expecting something like this to happen in this case? I mean, what are now the lawyers saying about this?
We're not expecting, Brother Taha. We're demanding. I mean, the OPP needs to do their job. They needs to do they need to do what is morally right and what's supposed to happen. I mean, every Canadian's asking for this, not just my family. You had prominent Canadian lawyers, criminal lawyers like Clayton Ruby that have questioned. They said that if there's a group beating, they're all parties to that offense, right? This is not coming from me. And other lawyers, the president of the Canadian Prison Law Association made a similar comment to that as well. What this is a demand. This is not asking us, and for them to say these to my family is such a gross insult and injustice to my late brother and to my entire family. Is that it's as if like my brother's life did not matter. But we're saying no. We're not stopping, and we're going to continue to demand this. Right? It's unfortunate that they're forcing our hands to go about it this way. It's unfortunate that they're continuing to force my family to fight. This is a gross injustice, gross miscarriage of justice. But we have to fight because we have no choice.
Absolutely. And that leads me to a question about the whole Justice for Sali campaign that you guys launched. Tell us a little bit about the campaign itself. What led you to actually formally launch this rather than just pursuing the legal case and just sort of, dealing with keeping it as a family affair? What motivated you to actually go out all in public and actually launch this campaign and pretty much turning this into a movement for broader conversations about prison reforms, police reforms, mental health issues, and how the intervention of mental health cases are dealt with, and so on. So tell us a little bit about what Justice for Sali is about, and what are some of the milestones or some of the achievements so far that you have made or reached over the past, let's say, 3.5 years in this campaign?
Brother Taha, I remember it was a couple of days after Soleiman's death. I had a very difficult and painful conversation with my mom. She asked me explicitly, like, Yusuf, I don't have a tongue, so my mom doesn't speak English that well, so I don't have a tongue. I need you to find out what happened to my son. For me, and that's where it started. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do it. All I knew is I wanted to find the truth to what happened to my late brother. I never intended for this movement to achieve. Alhamdulillah, the movement is where it is today because, there's blessings in it, and I feel humbled and honored to be part of this story. I never set out for this to be going about this way. I had a mom that requested this. I had a brother that I loved incredibly. Soleiman, Allah yarhamu, and I were only 18 months apart. He was very special to me. So I did this because I felt I needed to do this. I didn't know how or where this was going to be. And the movement's mandate, what has evolved to be, is two things. The first part of the mandate of the movement is we want charges against the guards who killed Soleiman Faqiri. And secondly, just as important, is for having transparency and accountability to Soleiman's death will allow another family to not go through what the Faqiri family is going through. The movement's that part is related to us having a family coalition, to giving other families that have had a voice, that have lost their loved ones within the parameters of the justice system, to get a voice, and that's what the movement's about. And alhamdulillah, we've been able to do a lot of things, as part of the movement, and this is a testament to the resilience and to the passion and the support that we've had across the nation. And I'm humbled by that, Brother Taha.
Incredible work, absolutely, and your voice is very, very not only much needed but very powerful. And I really hope, inshallah, all this effort is gonna be very fruitful in the days to come, in the months and years to come, in bringing about some very critical systemic changes that are so much needed. And speaking of systemic changes or systemic problems, I mean, for you, now having gone through this process, what are some of the systemic issues that you have come across that you felt that need to be addressed when it comes to policing and when it comes to when it comes to of course prison systems? And I'm going to ask you specifically, of course, about the mental health aspect in a minute, but I want you to just share with us some of the systemic problems that you faced, you felt, you experienced, your brother experienced specifically, and your family experienced, not only over the last 3.5 years, but even before that, when Soleiman, of course, experienced these kind of problems.
Well, Brother Taha, what's very important is that the system, the justice system or the healthcare system, is not set up to properly assess and to properly support individuals suffering from mental illness. This is vis-a-vis, housing support, vis-a-vis, medical support, whether there's enough social workers or psychiatrists. It's not set up. And what's problematic as well is that when individuals that suffer from mental illness, they tend to what happens is they tend to once they suffer from mental illness and they go into the criminal justice system, it's over essentially. They don't have the support. I'll give you a stat, and the percentages might be, I might be 1 or 2% wrong, but my understanding is in 2020, at least in Canada, in Toronto, I believe 68% of killings by the police in Toronto has been individuals that have suffered from mental illness. 68%. I mean, this is egregious. This is a preposterous statement, right? And what's even more tragic, you look at the city of Toronto, and I'm sure the audience outside of Canada is listening, but the city of Toronto or other cities in the United States, a lot of individuals that are out on the street that are homeless, I can rest you assured that more than 50% are ones that suffer from mental illness and addiction. That's a problem. That's on us as a society to put a fix to this. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, of course. So, I mean, what is obvious is, of course, unfortunately, the justice system, the same people who are supposed to protect our brother like Soleiman, have failed him and failed your family. If God forbid, anybody else you ever come across who have to deal with something like this, when it comes to a person dealing with mental health cases, what would you advise to law enforcement agencies, people who are supposed to protect people like Soleiman and Ijaz Chaudhry, for instance? What would you advise them to do differently, systemically and systematically speaking?
Absolutely. Well, to the families, what I would say is that one of the most important things, the most critical part of having your loved one that's suffering from mental illness to have a decent life or to be able to survive is you need to give them family support. They need family support. Your support will go way longer than any doctor, any mental health worker, because what people with mental illness, they need to be loved and understood. And that's what Soleiman had through the ways of what my mother gave him. With respect to the police in terms of its treatment or the justice system and treatment of people with mental illness, the first important thing, and it's a very obvious one, is training. There needs to be better training, right? But that better training does not mean necessarily, just taking or 1 or 2 courses. There has to be training that is appropriate. There needs to be cultural sensitivity training, and that's very important. That's the first part. But tempered with that, Brother Taha, is that there needs to be a shift in accountability and transparency. Why are more people with mental illness being killed by law enforcement and by the police? It's because when there's no accountability, when there's no transparency into these deaths, more and more is going to happen, because these individuals that commit these gross injustices against individuals that are suffering from mental, they'll continue to do it because they're not held into account. And that shift needs to happen. And that's why you have the tragedies like Ijaz Chaudhry's, the Pierre Corléans, the Justin Saint-Amour, the Regis Korchinski-Paquette's, the Soleiman Faqiri, and I can go on and on, sir. Accountability and transparency are paramount to shifting and to changing this, sir.
Very, very well said. And thanks to the incredible work that people like you are doing and others now joining this movement for reforms to the justice system, we are seeing now, of course, a lot more voices joining your voices. So, for instance, we know the last month, Canada's largest mental health hospital, KMH, call for the removal of police from the crisis care calls with mental health emergencies, for instance. We know that Toronto Police Accountability Coalition have been petitioning the police for several years to have mental health nurses wearing plain clothes alongside police when responding to people in crisis. And of course, with recently with what happened with Ijaz Chaudhry, and we did actually show on this, in particular with mental health specialists as well, and people who are dealing with mental health disabilities. We the same issues were highlighted, and I mean there have been so many conversations about, of course, how many recommendations have been made to the justice system, to the policing system, and sadly not much has happened since then. So do you foresee any at a policy level any reforms to be in place anytime soon in these institutions, based on what you're seeing based on your advocacy work so far?
Brother Taha, I believe that we have a long ways to go. I do have faith in the Canadian people. I do have faith in the society of making this change, but I think our work is we're far from what we need to do. There's the policy change, but there also needs to be that change, that shift in society, where we have to truly find a way to hold our officials into account, right? And when that accountability never happens, sir, we will never achieve it. Because what the problem also is that we have to understand as a society, police and law enforcement should never ever be the first individuals front line in treating people with mental illness. It should be social workers, psychiatrists, and mental health workers. And so as far as that, if that does not change, that will never change. And when there's no accountability, that will also not change. That doesn't mean that we give up when we put our hands up and always complain. What that means is that we must remain resilient, resolute, and firm in our demand through conviction, through dignity and honor. Because if we do not do this, our future generation will be disappointed, and this will leave a black mark on us as to how we did. Because mental illness is a Canadian problem, it's a national problem. And this needs to shift, and we have to do it through conviction.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that, Yusuf. I wanted to also focus a little bit about on Soleiman himself, his life. This year he would have been 34 years old, young man. And before its ultimate passing, we know, as you have highlighted yourself before as well, that Soleiman was a straight A student at the University of Waterloo, and he was an inspiring engineer before being diagnosed, of course, with schizophrenia in 2005. Please tell us a little bit about your younger brother. What was he like as a brother? What was he like as a son? What was he like as a student and as a friend that people knew him?
Brother Taha, this is usually the hardest part in my
interview. And I know I was going to say that. I'm sorry. I don't want to ask you. It's difficult.
This is important. No, I've done, my several interviews. This is usually always the hardest part, but it's important. Soleiman was an incredibly gifted young man. We came here originally as refugees from Afghanistan, and throughout his life, he was known to be special. When he was a kid, with my youngest brother, my mom got sick, and so what happened was Soleiman is the one that would heat the baby formula, take care of him literally for days. This was when he was 9 years old, right? And he would tease my oldest brother and my youngest brother of like, why are you talking back to me? I took care of you, right? And so he did this when he was 9, and he was always throughout his life a very dutiful son. One of the most important things for him was that he always wanted to be be in the good books of both my mom and dad, and that was the theme of his entire life. And even when he was growing up, this was something that's paramount for him. And growing up in high school, he played in the rugby and the football team. He was a straight A student. He was enrolled at Waterloo's engineering program, and these were things about him that remained steadfast even after his illness. As you stated at the beginning of the show, he was diagnosed in his late teens with this illness known as schizophrenia in his first year after a car accident. One of the most important things, and frankly, most inspirational things that happened, Brother Taha, was after his illness. Although schizophrenia took his life, his life was not the same after this illness. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but what happened was he ended up transcending that illness in itself. he ended up, although he couldn't finish his studies at Waterloo, he ended up actually learning Arabic. And he actually taught my mom how to read the Quran.
Wow.
And when I was, as I was getting closer to my faith, he actually taught me how to pray. So, because he ended up learning, his two languages were Farsi and English, but he ended up actually being able to be fluent in Arabic, and he knew the Quran. So this is after schizophrenia. This is after his illness. And for the audience who has someone suffering from mental illness, my humble advice to all of you is that if you have someone that's suffering from an illness, one of the greatest things you can do for them is let them thrive by just listening. One of the worst things you can do is ostracizing them and hiding their illness. I'm telling you this right now. My mother, it was my mom's shift that changed all that. And this would have not happened for Soleiman if she did not allow that to thrive. And I come from a community within the Muslim community, the Afghan community. The community continues to struggle in our treatment of our loved ones with mental illness. And that was the difference. No doctor, no social worker, no mental health worker could do for Soleiman what my mother did. And that's what we missed the most. I remember as a kid, we played video games together. It was kind of annoying that I was the oldest brother and he would beat us in, like, we played Super Nintendo, Mario Kart, Donkey Kong, and he was a very funny guy. I remember it was a couple months before his death. I was going late. It was late for work. I was about to be late for work. I was trying to catch the bus. And this was in the middle of the winter. This was at the beginning of the winter, and I was missing I couldn't find my toque, and he gave me a toque, give me his own toque, and kissed me in the forehead. And this is what him and I would do. And I remember that, Brother Taha, is that here's someone that's suffering so much, and he still managed to give with what he had.
It's tough, subhanAllah. I wish I had met him, to be honest, after hearing all this. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you the strength. I really did not want to put you in this
No, it's important.
difficult spot, but I think it's important for us, for people to hear what you have just said. And may God give you and your family the much needed healing. And I hope, inshallah, through this experience, it will inspire us to do better than we have been when it comes to our own loved ones and in our own community who have this gift of mental illness, as you have been saying. As subhanAllah, there's no doubt that the gift that God has given them are things that may transform your life one day, and it certainly seems to have done that for you and your family. And I wanted to ask you this, if you are comfortable talking about. And that is, after his passing away and this tragic incident, how has your life and how has your family's life changed? Hopefully for the better in some ways, whether spiritually or in terms of awakening of some sort, in terms of your, a work for justice or anything else internally as a family. How has that changed you? And of course, it could be positive or negative, but I was just sharing some examples.
Brother Taha, I appreciate your comment here in this question. Before I respond to your question, I want to say something, is that in our beautiful tradition, it says behind every test, there is a blessing, right? And behind every blessing, there is a test. Soleiman, Allah yarhamu, his life was a gift to my family. My mom, it's interesting, you just mentioned that my mom often says that he was a gift to me, right? We are better people today because of Soleiman. We are better people because of the pain that he went through. And us using our collective grief, although we're in pain, we see this as an honorable fight to leave a legacy for him and in this society to be the voice for the voiceless. And we're a very simple family. We come from humble roots. I'm a very simple man, very unsophisticated. My brother was the brilliant, gifted mind. And so I am, I see this fight as an honor, and I see this fight as an opportunity, to help others. And, and although, sir, fighting in this fight, it's been extremely personally difficult for me. I mean, I couldn't sustain certain relationships because of fighting this. I'll be very honest, but I wouldn't trade it for a thing,
Mm.
because I see me fighting in this fight as a family is for me ultimately is that if I did not do this fight, what if someone who's a single mother or First Nations or racialized or do not have the wherewithal and has loved ones suffering from mental illness? What do I say to them? So I carry this heavy yet humble responsibility, important responsibility to fight. And what an opportunity to fight. To fight for the as we say in Arabic, for the masum or for the miskin. And so yes, it's painful, yes, it's difficult, yes, it's profoundly excruciating, but ultimately it's an honor that we're able to be in this fight.
Well, brother Yusuf, you just answered a question that I was going to ask you about what keeps you going and what motivates you to actually keep fighting. And mashallah, what a beautiful response and what a beautiful answer. And may God give you and your family honor in this world and in the hereafter. And of course, to our brother, dear brother Suleiman, may Allah have mercy on his soul in ways that could never imagine, inshallah, and we could never imagine. I wanted to ask you a couple more questions before we conclude.
Yes, sir.
One was, what can the civil society, what can Canadians do so that we hopefully never have to face such types of injustices again? What can people do for Justice for Suleiman in particular, Justice for Sali campaign in particular? And what can people do for this wider campaign that you have, as you have been just talking about, for people who have not only the burden of having a mental health, a mental illness, let's say, who happen to be young, have a mental health disability, who happen to be racialized, who happen to be maybe Muslim or indigenous from indigenous community, or maybe Sikh community, or any other minority in Canada. What can we do as individuals to fight for and keep this fight for justice alive?
First and foremost, for the audience who's listening, please pray for us. Keep us in your du'as. That's the best thing you do more than anything. I think on a conceptual level, for folks here in Canada, write to your member of provincial parliament, asking them why there isn't accountability and transparency into Soleiman's death. I think that's very important, because this case isn't about Soleiman Faqiri anymore. It's not about the Faqiri family. It's about a Canadian man suffering from mental illness that an injustice happened to him, and the individuals that were supposed to have the moral integrity and courage did not execute that. I think as a society, one of the most important things that we can do in our treatment of mental illness, Brother Taha, is we have to work long and hard in unlearning. We come from, in our cultures, and I'm saying within the Muslim community, unlearn certain cultural notions, like, the stigma.
Yes.
If we're going to help and support this movement, we got to unlearn. For example, in my language, in Farsi, my native tongue, we have a derogatory term for people suffering from mental illness. It's called dewana. That's what it means in Persian. Mm-hmm. This exists, I'm sure, in Urdu and Arabic, and the other respective languages, within the Muslim community. So we need to have that shift. People with mental illness, they don't choose to have these illnesses. It's given to them. And it's a very dangerous thing that sometimes we as a community, we work hard to hide it, or we work hard to reinforce the stigma. What you're doing this by doing this stigma is you're actually causing more issues. And so the best way to help is educating yourself. And in terms of this case, we have rallies across the nation. We're hoping to, we have events across Canada, and we'll continue to fight for Soleiman and give other families a voice. And so one of the things you can do is follow us on social media, continue to educate yourself, continue to understand that the best way to change the system and to shift it is to hold accountability and transparency. Next time there's an election at the provincial level, at the federal level, or at the municipal level, or in other countries that are listening, or if it's the United States, at the state level or at the federal level, you need to hold your politicians accountable. How much money are you donating to mental illness? What are you doing to individuals suffering from mental illness, right? We cannot allow lip service to continue like this, because there will be more Soleimans and more Ijaz Chowdhuries and more Ashley Smiths, more Pierre Corleones and body bags.
Yeah.
This is not a simple issue. This is a life and death issue, Brother Taha, and we have to make this shift.
Absolutely. How can people follow you or your campaign, so Justice for Solly campaign, on social media? If you can give us some of the some of the handles, or any specifics, coordinates, that would be great.
Absolutely, Brother Taha. So we have a Launch Good page. We're still trying to fundraise for the campaign. If people can go to our Launch Good. We're trying to fundraise for our campaigns. We're continuing to fight. If anybody is able to, inshallah, if you can donate to our campaign.
Okay.
We have an Instagram at #JusticeForSolly, Twitter at #Justice4Solly, and our Facebook page, Justice for Solly, FORSOLI. And then this week, for the audience, I know some folks are outside of the country and sometimes are outside of Toronto. Every event that we have goes live either on Instagram and Facebook. Okay. So if anybody's interested, you can follow us and watch our events. This week, we're going in front of the Ontario Provincial Police headquarters in a city called Orillia, which is about an hour and a half from Toronto. Mm-hmm. This is the headquarters. We're not going to stop until we get justice for Soleiman. So for folks, if you cannot make it, feel free to watch it. We have our events live on Instagram and Facebook. And then we have other events and rallies prepared as our movement continues, inshallah.
Inshallah. I was going to also ask a question about how is Justice for Solly organization and this movement that you're working, how has been the response from other social justice campaigns, other campaigns who are looking for similar types of course, responses from the from institutions of justice, of course. And are there any other human rights organizations that you work with, or civil rights organizations that you work with? How has been the response, a collaborative, I guess, response from the wider community in Canada?
Alhamdulillah, Brother Taha, we're humbled by this overwhelming support. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we had 60 organizations that issued statements, and I'll give you some. There was Justice for All in Canada. There was the Dean Support Services. There's a Canadian Civil Liberties Association, which is the biggest civil liberties organization in Canada. They put out a statement today. Prominent Canadian Senator Peter Beam and Kim Pate, both of them made statements. We had, the Schizophrenia Society of Canada making statements. And there's the Mood Disorder Society of Canada that made a statement. There's the Arch Disability Law Center. There's the Canadian United Postal Workers. 56,000 members made a statement on behalf of the organization. What this effectively says is that these organizations are counting on us, and they see Soleiman as a catalyst for change. And so that's why this isn't just about my brother. And so we're humbled by this support, and they've been extremely collaborative with us and telling us to continue with the work. And on the side, Brother Taha, we've been working very closely with my dear brother Hijaz's family. This fight their fight is my fight, and vice versa. And and I've also been working with the family of Jordan Shared, his mom Angela Voss. She's someone that I've been working closely on fighting for him, and then there's Ashley Smith's family. So we're all working collectively together, because if we don't, Brother Taha, work in silos, we're not going to be successful.
Yes.
Because every life has a value, and these lives have all the same value in my estimation.
That's phenomenal. Thank you so much, Brother Yusuf, for taking the time out to be with us on Canada Today. You're really a source of inspiration. You're a source of you're definitely somebody that hopefully others will inspire to when it comes to fighting for the right thing and fighting for others. And your collaborative spirit really is something that inspires me and inspires others to actually fight for a higher cause. And at the end of the day, what do we want? We want to save lives. We want to make sure that no more lives are lost in such horrific, unspeakable ways. We want to make sure that we shift the community and the society's perception of mental health and people who suffer from mental health issues and problems. We simply want justice for everybody, especially those who are marginalized, who come from marginalized communities, like Soleiman Faqiri did. So thank you, Brother Yusuf, for your courage, for your fortitude, for all the inspiration that you have shared with us this afternoon on this show.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you, Brother
Yes.
Taha, for giving me an opportunity. I see this as an obligation. I see this as a duty to do this. And for me, if I don't, then how can I answer to saying I'm not doing this? And if there's anybody here that needs any support, feel free to message our team on Facebook. I'm happy to support anybody in any capacity. I'm here for you folks. We're supposed to work together, and if anybody needs any support or thing, I'm happy to assist you in every capacity. And I'm really grateful, Brother Taha, that you gave me this opportunity. It's a collective duty and obligation.
Of course, and you're just a small part of that big puzzle, the fighting for justice for everybody. And thank you so much, Brother Yusuf, once again, and with that very positive spirit of working together and collaborating for something bigger than all of us. Thank you so much once again. You were watching, all of you, you're watching Canada Today. Thank you for tuning in this afternoon. And thanks to Dawanet and TorontoMuslim.com for its marketing partnership. And you're watching Canada Today with Taha Ghayur this afternoon. And we look forward to seeing you once again very soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.